Hello, hello. Welcome to the PG-ish podcast. I'm Erin, a corporate marketing manager by day, podcast host by night, and single mom to 2 young daughters 24/7. In short, PG-ish parenting is the cliff notes to personal growth as a parent. Since those kiddos are always watching and learning from the adults in their life, like you, PG-ish is parenting guidance-ish to support a life worthy of imitating. Welcome and enjoy. Before we dive in, I want to mention 2 things I cannot live without. I can't go a day without my Pique Teas, which are so easy to travel with, which I've actually been doing a lot of these days. Not only do I get to sip on my favorite Sun Goddess matcha while on the go, but I also bring with me the BT electrolytes, elderberry vitamin C, and ginger elixir to make sure I'm not only caffeinated without needing to stop at overpriced coffee shops, but that I'm also keeping up my immunity and soothing any digestion woes while on the road. Pique Teas are rooted in research and the highest quality ingredients, all the while supporting a healthy immune system and your overall wellness with antioxidants that you're likely not getting in your typical morning brew. And then next up, which I do promise I'm a spontaneous person, but I also do like my routines. So the other thing that I do before I drink my Pique Tea matcha is drink LMNT. And I drink that as soon as I wake up. Their mission is to restore health through hydration, and most of us go through our days dehydrated. Electrolytes aren't only for athletes, they're for everyone. This science-backed formula of sodium, potassium, and magnesium will not only hydrate you, but also prepare you for whatever the day throws at you. Use the link in the show notes to give them a try and to receive a free sample pack. If you want to support PG-ish, the best way is to check out these companies. Find out more in the show notes. All right, my friend. If you're in the US, you know that tax season is upon us, which means that if you're an American taxpayer, you're likely mulling over some numbers, sorting through paperwork, scratching your head in confusion as to how all the figures add up, or simply perplexed by all the guesswork, wondering if you've covered all your bases. So fun, isn't it? Now, while I won't have all the answers for you today in today's interview, I do hope to shed some light on your finances and how to set both yourself and your kiddo up on a path of financial freedom. If only this was taught in school, right? I don't know, maybe if we weren't learning this in our 30s and 40s, we wouldn't consider this topic taboo or hard or completely frustrating. So hopefully I can break that down for you today, because today I have Maya Corbic, the founder of the Wealthy Kids Investment Club and the popular Instagram account Teach Kids Money, where she inspires parents to raise financially independent kids. And to give you a little bit of background on her, this topic wasn't always easy for Maya. From challenging beginnings in shelters and government housing, Maya is a first-generation immigrant and CPA who draws from her experience of overcoming financial challenges to simplify money matters to inspire kids and adults alike to pursue financial success. Maya is also the author of a kid's book, From Piggy Banks to Stocks, The Ultimate Guide for a Young Investor, which unravels investing concepts and equips children with essential investing skills while keeping them engaged. Her ultimate vision is to empower every child to become a financially independent adult. In this episode, you'll learn how to have better money habits, how to invest for greater returns, not only for yourself, but also on your child's behalf, and how to navigate some money blind spots, just to name a few. I trust you'll like this conversation, so let's jump in. Maya, I'm so excited to have you on PG-ish today. You have an amazing story, so I would love for you to just start with how you got into the business that you're in now and how it's evolved. But let's start from the beginning.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show, Erin. I'm really excited to be here. So yes, hi everyone. My name is Maya Corbic. I am the first generation immigrant. I immigrated from war-torn Bosnia with my parents and my brother. We lost everything in the war. We immigrated with 2 suitcases and $50. And I lived in government shelters and government housing. I had 2 part-time jobs when I was in high school. Kind of worked my way up, and I worked hard. I got my CPA designation and I worked as a CPA. And as a CPA, I also met some people that were making really good income, like 6-figure income, and they were still struggling with money. They had a hard time sleeping. They were very, very high stress. And I wanted to understand, why are they like that? Because to me, 6-figure income was something, quite high. And I was like, why are they struggling when, I remember my mom trying to stretch every dollar that she possibly could. And then I realized that it wasn't really their fault. It's just that nobody ever taught them about money. When they were growing up, they didn't learn it from their parents. They didn't learn it in school. And at that time, my kids were very young. And I wanted to see, what are my children going to learn in school? And this was some 12 years ago. So my son was 5, 6, and my daughter was 3 or 4 years old. And I started like really reading the curriculum and understanding the school curriculum. And I realized they were not going to learn much. I think nowadays schools have a little bit more, but back then they really didn't have much financial literacy education. And actually, at that time, also, my husband and I managed to pay off all of our debt and our mortgage. So I was able to actually quit my job and start, doing this, like teaching not only my children, but other children about financial literacy and helping parents teach kids. And that was kind of the beginning of the journey.
No, that's amazing. My grandparents moved to the States from Portugal, in their 20s. And I just remember growing up with them, like hiding money under mattresses and walls, whatever. And I'm like, as an adult, I'm like, I don't think that was the best way to do it. But, again, my parents weren't teaching me anything either. So I think it's just so important to have that financial literacy like you're talking about. So thank you for creating a curriculum for kids and adults.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like for people that come as immigrants, there's that scarcity mindset that we all have because, the situation was as such that like you had to put your money aside and save it and not spend it. So now, it's a little bit different because I have a lot more and I'm very comfortable. And now what I'm trying to do is switch from that mindset of scarcity to the mindset of abundance. And I'm trying to also make sure that I don't pass that mindset of scarcity onto my kids. And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Let's camp there for a minute then. So how can we shift our mindset from scarcity to abundance?
I think it's really important to be aware of it. I think a lot of times I'm not even aware that I'm doing certain things or making certain decisions that are based in that scarcity mindset. It's really important for us to realize what kind of mindset do we have around money. So I usually like to tell parents to think about things that they saw when it comes to money when they were younger. What did they hear about money when they were younger? And emotionally, how anything related to money impacted them. So like did their parents argue about money? And maybe because of that, they associate money with strife and arguments and they would rather avoid that topic, right? So it's not an easy thing to do. It actually is almost like you're diving into something that you may not necessarily want to bring up because it may bring some painful memories. Maybe you're comparing, you remember how you used to compare yourself to wealthy neighbors and, their kids that had a pool and, vacationed every year or whatever it was, right? So a lot of decisions that we make as adults, we really make them because a lot of that psychology is rooted in our childhood. And sometimes, without realizing, we can pass on some of that to our children. So I know for me, I try, but it's an everyday struggle, really.
Yeah, I know. I try to catch myself too with my kids. I mean, being a single mom, I'm very aware of the money that I spend. And, we go out to dinner, but it's like, okay, well, we don't need to eat everything and dessert, but I'm like, what are the conversations I can have around that? So it's not that scarcity, but more of a choice of we're going to spend our money well and maybe on other things that we really want, not just on cake,
Right. It's about mindful spending. I think that's one thing that I'm trying to do now and encourage other, parents and people who follow me on Instagram. It's really important to be mindful spender. And what I mean by that is that, personal finance is called personal for a reason. And we all have different values and things that are important to us. And as long as we take care of our money responsibly, meaning that, when you get your paycheck, you pay your bills, you put some money aside for retirement. And if there's any money left over, I don't think anybody should be judging anybody, whether or not we're buying purses or shoes or whatever. It's like, if that gives you joy, then go for it, right? But, the problem becomes when sometimes we're making purchases because we're trying to fill this emotional need or something, something that we're dealing with. So I think it's important to know when that's happening and to identify that. But, if we're mindfully spending our money, it's kind of like, okay, yes, I know that's going to cost a lot of money, but it's going to bring me a lot of joy. And like, I'm doing it for X, Y, Z reason, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I like that. It's definitely personal. And we all have our reasons behind things. But let's take a step back. So if someone was just starting off and they're trying to figure out their own finances and help their kids, what are just some good like money habits to start with? Like money 101, like where do we start?
Yeah, that, and there are a lot of people that are in that boat because nobody ever taught them. So they want to make things right with their kids. So I always say, number one money skill that I even teach the kindergartens because they're able to understand it is just understanding the difference between needs and wants, and also understanding that, we take care of needs first, then we take care of wants. And then again, this is something that we can explain to kids saying like, hey, you know what? Needs are things we need for survival. Wants are things that are nice to have, but we can survive without them. And when we go shopping, if you're coming grocery shopping with me, I know you want that candy, but first we have to buy nutritious food. If there is money left over, then, we'll buy that candy. I think financial literacy is sort of like a step ladder. It's like you have to really learn one skill well first before you can move on to the next one. So the next one would be probably, having that budget. And I know budget sounds very restrictive, but again, budget is really there to help us like reach our goals. So even having like a looser budget is better than not having a budget at all. And then involving kids with that budget, especially if they're older, if they're younger, I always like to involve kids like making their birthday budget because that's something that, they can be in control of and we can oversee. And then after that, it's like things like managing credit card debt and those payments, like making sure that, we're doing that properly. And then investing. And I mean, there's really so much, but I would definitely say that's kind of like the path that I would take.
I like that. And then in terms of like investing, I mean, I feel like there's so much intimidating language around that a lot of people just don't even get started outside of maybe like their 401k at work because that's an easy, gateway. But then it's like, I don't know what else to do past that.
Yeah.
So I guess one, for adults, how can they break down kind of learning that system and then be able to get their kids excited about it too?
Yeah. So, I would say a very large majority of adults feel exactly the way you just described. And a lot of times when I talk to people about investing, their eyes just glaze over and like they check out immediately. Like they're just like, I'm done. I'm not talking about this. But one thing I want everybody to know is that, investing is really easy to understand. Peter Lynch, who is a famous investor, he said that as long as you have completed grade 4 math, that you should be able to understand investing. So what's confusing is the terminology and all these like fancy words, but in reality, it's all really simple. And that's actually the reason why I wrote the book that I wrote, because this book was really written more for the younger me. I wish I had a resource like this because it really simplifies basics of investing in a language that a 10-year-old can understand. And it has lots of pictures. So when I was actually writing the book, I had some testers, some families like parents and children. And it was parents that came back to me and said that, they finally understood investing. So no shame in using a kid's book to actually understand how investing works, because we all have to start somewhere. And, a lot of times people say to me, well, you're a CPA. It's easy for you. You study this. I'm like, I did not study this. CPA is a completely different thing. I really had to learn this on my own and decipher it for myself. And then once I deciphered it, I was like, everybody should know this and everybody could know this. Like, I think everybody, like a majority of the people are capable of understanding this information. The book is for kids and like the kids can understand this. If kids can understand it, so can adults.
Yeah, there is just that barrier to entry, but like you're saying, it's not as hard as we think. So we just need to get started and learn the basics and then keep building upon that. Yeah. And then for parents though, I mean, I think the next step then is also like setting your kids up well, which again, there's more like tricky language of like, okay, do I, at least here in the US, it's like we have our 529s, or do I like even set up an LLC and employ my kids? Like there's so many other things that again, we just stop dead in our tracks and it's like, I'll figure it out later, but then we're losing time and money. Are there any ways to set up our kids well when they're young so that they're not struggling later?
Absolutely. Yes. So I encourage everybody to start with even, contributing $10 to an investment account for them. I mean, there are different accounts that you can open for them. One of them is the 529 plan. If you want more than that, then you can open like UTMA account. If you have a business, you could do custodial Roth IRA. There's a bit of tax planning involved with that. And I definitely suggest that you contact a professional tax accountant that can help you set it up. But it's beautiful because essentially you can employ your child, like even if they're a baby, and people are like, how can I employ a baby? Well, if you need to advertise, you can use your child if you're comfortable with it, of course, for marketing purposes. They could be on your posters, and you would pay them whatever the fair wages are for a baby model. And, there needs to be a job posting set up, and you need to officially hire your child and like do all these things. Like that's where the tax accountant comes in. But essentially what you can do is pay them the basic amount, which would be just under the tax threshold. So the child is not being taxed. That money can be invested into custodial Roth IRA and grow tax free. And then at the same time, your business is getting a deduction for this amount that you're paying for marketing expenses, and you're paying less tax. So it's a brilliant way to help your child and, of course, help your business as well. So there are a lot of different ways that, different things that parents can do. But even if you just do $10 a week over a long period of time, because of the compound interest, that amount can grow significantly.
Yeah. And I think as they get older too, you start having those conversations, very basic, conversations about interest and whatnot. And then, they're just growing up with that narrative of how we invest and how we spend our money wisely. So that's really good. And I think it is, you're playing the long game when you're putting money aside and getting that compound interest.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing. I really want everybody to understand, again, because investing intimidates a lot of people. And a lot of times when people think of investing, they think of somebody just sitting in front of their computer day in and day out watching stuff. That's not what investing is. There are different types of investing. There's trading, and that's what trading is. Trading is like you're sitting in front of your computer, you're watching stocks, you're buying, selling all day long. No. Most of us are long-term investor or longer-term investors where you literally have to figure out, what is your goal? We all know what our goals are, right? There are a lot of free assessments online where you get to you figure out what is your risk profile. And then based on your risk profile and your goals, you would be picking the investments for your portfolio, whether those are stocks or bonds, more risky, less risky. So you would build that portfolio and you wouldn't really tinker with it, because research has shown that the more you sell and tinker with that portfolio, you sell stocks, you buy stocks, whatever, you actually end up, first of all, paying a lot of fees by doing that. And second of all, you miss out on some of the growth. So my portfolio personally, I'm a long-term investor. So I'm investing for like 10, 20 years. That's like my time horizon. I just keep buying stocks once a month when my money comes in from my business, and I will contribute to my portfolio, and that's it. I just let it be. And I do it on a regular basis, and I periodically look at it, but I'm fairly confident that I've invested in the right amounts and right things, and I don't really touch it. It's not gambling. It's not like a lot of times people think of investing as like, oh, it's gambling. Like, oh, this stock is going to do well. And it doesn't. Like, that's not what investing is. Gambling is completely different, right? So,
yeah. And I mean, you can't predict the future. So, you could pick a stock thinking it might do well and it might not, or vice versa. And it's just like, you're just in it and you have to be patient.
You have to be patient. You have to pick right companies. And I absolutely love, and this is another thing that I wish everybody would learn. It's something called ETFs and index funds. So I do have a free, cheat sheet that explains what those are. And those are my favorite investments. And I literally think the kids can understand what those are. So definitely adults can understand. They provide a little bit of immediate diversification. Their fees are very low. And, it's really easy to invest in those. And there's so many benefits. And it's definitely something to look into. And I think a lot of people can easily understand what those are. So on my Instagram account, there's a link for a free cheat sheet if people want to grab it, and they can learn more about it.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll definitely link to your Instagram in the show notes. Yeah. It was interesting when I was prepping for this interview, and I was talking to my daughters, they're 10 and 12, and like, what do you guys want to know about, money and finances and investing? And they're like, how to be a millionaire when I'm like, by I'm 30. I'm like, okay, well, we need to talk about that a little bit, but it is funny to think about the culture that our kids are growing up in today, because they do see these influencers on social media where it almost looks like they're doing nothing and getting paid. And have you seen any sort of shift in this kind of conversation or this narrative with our kids of like, you do have to kind of work, like, yes, there's passive income that's possible, but it's more than just posting something on YouTube and thinking the millions are coming in. I don't know if you've had that conversation with anyone.
It's so funny, actually. I did another podcast interview like a couple of hours ago, and I just had that conversation with another mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely we want to teach our kids about passive income, 100%. But in order to have passive income, you really have to put in work first. It doesn't matter whether that's investing. So with investing, you have to somehow come up with that money to be invested, right? And then once it's invested, it's going to pay dividends and you can use that money for your lifestyle or whatever. But if you're building a business or whatever it is that you're doing, an Instagram account, it takes a lot of hard work. Like I mean, I have 130,000 followers, but let me tell you that I posted for, I think, 2 or 3 years every single day. And it didn't matter if I was on vacation, if I was sick or whatever was happening. It took a long time to get there. And also, like, there are people out there that will accept any kind of sponsorship. So yes, maybe they make a lot more money than I do on mine. I'm actually very selective who I brand with. And so I don't make that kind of, like, Instagram is not my primary source of income. But I think a lot of people don't really understand that. They just think, oh, you have so many followers, you must be making a lot of money. And also, like, it can be really deceiving what, we post on Instagram. So, like, of course, I'm going to post like all the good things that we're doing, right? But every once in a while, I actually think, I'm like, oh man, I really need to post something like, oh, like, I actually forgot to pay my business credit card bill like 2 months ago. And I'm like, people need to know this. This is a real stuff. This is what really happens. Like, I don't need to just paint this perfect picture because that's not real, right? But I think some people don't really do that. And so it may look like, oh, these people have it, figure it out and they're making all this money. And it doesn't really work like that.
Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to having those conversations, the realistic conversations with our kids of like, it takes time and effort and the knowledge.
Yeah, you have to put in the time. That's for sure. And unfortunately, I actually was doing some research and it seems that Gen Zs now, they're less likely to work as hard as maybe Gen X or millennials. And it seems that they're also less likely to maybe save their money or invest their money for later on because of the current economic situation, because they also believe that they'll never be able to afford a home. They'll never be able to like do certain things that maybe us who are older can do. So, I think it's just a different mentality and a mind shift.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the economic climate right now is a little tough for sure, with interest rates high and inflation and all that. I definitely had those conversations with my kids. And it was actually funny. They were watching Home Alone last night and they're like, Mom, look at all these groceries you got for $19. I'm like, yeah, that wouldn't work for us, would it? So they're aware of what's going on. But yeah, I could definitely see how people might spend their money differently and not invest or be weary of it too. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, is it's personal and you should spend money on the things that bring you joy, but maybe people are overspending in that effort of finding joy too.
Yeah, I think it's we have to be like really careful about what, does it bring us joy or we're just trying to keep up with Joneses or maybe something else, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. In all of your teaching and working with folks, have you noticed any trends and like blind spots that people just come across or maybe they're not aware of with their money or their investments?
Well, the thing about money is that it really permeates to every aspect of our life. I'll just give you one example. And, this happened a few years ago. There was a mom that came to me after one of my workshops and she said to me that she was very proud because she finally figured out how she's going to teach her kids about money. And I said, oh, okay, that's really interesting because I always love hearing what other people are doing with their kids because I always feel like I can learn something new. And she said to me that she was giving them 1/4 per week as allowance. And I said, oh, why do you do that? And she's like, well, I want them to know that money is hard to come by. And I said, okay. I said, do they have to do something for that quarter? She's like, no. I said, do they have to do it? Like, do they have opportunity to earn more money? She said, no. She's like, I just want them to know that money is hard to come by. So I just thought, I'm like, okay, that's really interesting that was her, I guess that was her sole goal. Money is hard to come by. But then there are so many blind spots with that like number one is, if you give them a quarter, what they can't really learn to do anything with that quarter, because allowance is a tool. Allowance is not a gift. Allowance is there to teach kids to do something with that money. So they can either save it to buy something. If they get a quarter, nowadays it's going to take them years to save up for something, right? So they're just going to give up. They're going to feel discouraged, and that's it. Like they're game over. They will also have not enough money to invest, right? Like there's no way that they are going to save enough money to start investing. They also won't have any money to give. I mean, if you want to teach them to be generous, like how are they going to give? And they're going to be so stingy because they only have one quarter. Like, do you think they're really going to give something to someone? I don't think so. And then another part of it is like you're passing on your negative money mindset onto your kids. Like, do you really want that? And is this the best way to teach them about working hard? And it's not to point fingers at that mom. It's just more that sometimes when we make decisions, we don't really think of all the, I guess, angles and how that decision is impacting everything else that we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's good. Speaking of allowance, do you have any hot tips for allowance? Because I go back and forth all the time on whether or not to give it or not.
Yeah. So, this is actually perfect then. So we can talk about that because parents are really divided when it comes to allowance. And I've witnessed so many social media feuds over allowance. It gets really heated.
It does.
It definitely does. But the thing is, like, what I want everybody to understand, just because I've been doing this over a decade, I've come to realize that there is no one fit all approach. Money, again, is personal. So, and a lot of it depends on, when we're teaching our children about money, a lot of it depends on the values that we have, our family values. So it's kind of like same as parenting. When we're parenting, we don't all parent the same way. We parent in accordance with our values. So the same goes for money. And allowance is a teaching tool. It's not a gift. When you give that money to your child, regardless of how that money came about, you are giving it so that they can manage it when the stakes are low and the dollar values are low, so that they know what to do with money when they're actually making, a really good living. Let's say they're out of college or whatnot. But there are actually 4 different allowance types that you can choose from, and there is no right or wrong. And you can actually flip from one, and try another one. If the first one didn't work, that's perfectly okay. So the first one is allowance tied to chores. And most parents who like this allowance method, they believe that, they want to teach their children to work hard for their money. Money doesn't come by easily. Obviously, if these kids don't do the chores, they don't get paid. Now, there's a second approach where you give allowance that's not tied to chores. And these parents believe that kids should do chores because they are contributing members of the family unit, so that nobody will pay them to make their bed once they become adults, right? Or take the trash out. But these parents, let's say the kids don't do the chores, they don't take away the allowance. They will take away other things like screen time, play dates, and so on. And there's a third allowance method, which is the mixture of the first two. So the parents will give some money regardless of the chores, but the kids will have an opportunity to earn money by doing some additional chores. And the parents can choose what those are. Some parents like to choose chores that they would pay maybe somebody else to do, like, for example, a car wash or shredding of the confidential documents and so on. And then the fourth method is really not giving allowance at all. But, if there are some parents that feel very strongly about this, they're like, my child will not get any of my money. But I still believe that, we need to give them some opportunities to practice with that money. And the whole idea behind allowance is really just to transfer that purchasing responsibility from you onto them. So instead of you deciding whether you should buy that toy and that candy and whatnot, they're the ones deciding, because they don't know how much money you have in your budget and how much money is in your bank account, but they know how much money they have. So then they can actually make those decisions, and they can realize like, oh, I cannot afford this just yet, but maybe I need to save up for it. But when it comes to like no allowance, I encourage parents to give their kids a chance to manage some money. So it would be like, oh, they can manage their birthday party budget, right? Or back to school shopping. And at the beginning, you may be heavily involved, and then slowly you kind of, just stay back and let them manage it on their own. But at least like they have some experience doing that.
Yeah, that's good. I know I opened a bank account for my girls over the summer, and they have their debit cards and they think they're so cool and they buy gum, and it's like, but we're starting that. And I like watching them like watch the wheels turn in their heads of like, do I really want this? Do I want to spend my money? How much do I have? You're giving them control to make those decisions for sure, instead of just saying, I'm not buying that for you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, speaking of, just managing our money, do you have any like certain paycheck rituals or allocations or like even just general percentages of what we should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely personal, right? But what I do typically is like, so it kind of changed over the years. I mean, like with my children, for example, when I was giving them allowance, they're older now, they're 16 and 14, they don't get allowance anymore, but we would make them save 50% of their income. And a lot of times people said, oh, that's a lot. But I was like, well, like they didn't have any spending needs. So they would save 50% and we would eventually invest it. For me and my husband, we had this thing that, we were basically living off of his income. We were just saving my income. And, when with our first house, like we were using my income to pay off the mortgage and we were using my income to fund our retirement. So, and it kind of keeps changing. At one point in time, like I just had my business. My business was starting out. So there was not that much money in there. So we had to kind of switch to my husband. We keep changing things around, but we put a lot of things on auto transactions so that those payments or transfers to proper investment accounts just happen as soon as the money hits the bank account. So that money, we don't even see it. It's gone, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's good. That's how I have it set up too. It's like out of sight, out of mind. Just get it in there. I don't have to think about it for sure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book that you wrote? I know we touched upon it, but is there more that you want to get into about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the book is it's kid friendly. And, a lot of times people ask me, what age is it appropriate for? So like anyone ages 10 and up. So adults, teenagers, kids, I literally go into, I wish I had a copy here. I've given all of them out. But I go into like heavy duty topics and, we talk about what are capital gains, what are dividends, what's bull market, what's bear market. And it's literally explained in such a fun way. There's some of it is like little stories that help you understand like what's going on, how companies how they go from being private to becoming public companies, how does it work with shares and like, when you're selling shares, buying shares, like that kind of thing. I mean, it's really something, again, that I wish I had when I was a child. And the book is called From Piggy Banks to Stocks, The Ultimate Guide for a Young Investor. And it's available on Amazon and anywhere else really online, any bookstore.
Awesome. Speaking of piggy banks, it was funny. My youngest the other day decided to break open our piggy bank that we have, and she counted all the money. It took her 2 days to count all the coins, and we had, I don't know, like $70 in there. And it's like, okay, well, I'll give you some because you counted all this. And then she's like, well, what else can we do with it? And I went through some options, and then we just decided to go have a girls' manicure day. And it was like, see, like,
I love that. That is so nice.
We have choices, and we get to, be saved, and now we get to do this. So.
Right. And I think that quality time, that's just something that, usually when people talk about money and like, why is money important? It's not the money itself. It's not like we want to be sitting in a pile of cash. It's more about like, what does that money do for us? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, It's that quality time that we get to spend with our kids and go, on like for manicures, right? Like that's such a special treat.
Yeah. No, it's really the freedom, right? To make those choices. Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, with taxes coming up, how can we best prepare? Are there any tips or tricks? I know that it brings a lot of anxiety for people when taxes are due.
Yeah, I think definitely start early. Don't wait until the last moment. There are people that like to do their own taxes, and that is okay if your situation is really simple. But I always suggest that, people, let's say, who have, I don't know, rental properties or maybe like a business income and like a employee, like they're actually an employee. I would always suggest that, you get like a tax advisor or somebody to do your taxes, a professional, because they can maybe find some savings that you may not necessarily be able to find those. And I always suggest, to talk to your kids about the taxes. Like, what's going on? Like, why are you doing this? They may be completely not interested in this at all, but it's just, good to show them and say, this is something that you will be doing one day. And if they start asking questions, you can probably answer a little bit more. If you have receipts that you are like adding up or whatever, they can help you add up those receipts. I mean, this is something that maybe maybe you'll even pay them for, their help. So they can definitely be involved. One thing that I like to talk about with kids or just mention it, and sometimes like when it comes to taxes too, like we pay different taxes and those depend on the governments that we have, right? So depending on what your family belief is, and when it comes to government, it's kind of like, depending on who we put in the power, that really impacts the taxes that we pay. So I like to tie that in as well and just have a discussion around that.
That's good. Yeah. Because it just makes them more aware of the political environment.
Yeah. And why I think it's important to go out and vote, and vote for what you believe in, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. That's good. All the conversations that my parents never had with me, I'm learning all these tools as I raise my kids. Well, Maya, I'm glad that you came on the show today. Where can my audience find you?
Yeah, thank you so much, first of all, for having me. This has been really lovely. So I can be found on Instagram. I hang out there quite often. My Instagram handle is teach.kids.money. I have a blue check mark next to that name. Make sure you follow the right account. There are a lot of scammers that will try to pretend to be me and sell you crypto or other investments. So I will never reach out to you first. But if you go on that account, I often, like almost daily, post different tips on teaching kids about money, and you can ask me questions. I'm happy to help. I also have the book From Piggy Banks to Stocks, The Ultimate Guide for a Young Investor, that's available on Amazon. And I have two websites. One is dinari.com, that's spelled DINARI.com. And then the second website is wealthykids.club, CLUB. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put all those links in the show notes for sure. Well, this was great. Thanks so much. Please let me know if this is a topic that you are interested in, because I would love to get more folks on the show that talk about financial success and how to invest. Because again, these are things that we were never taught, which is just wild, because who needs, I don't know, all the stupid things that they teach in school that we never use. But anyway, if you want to find out more about Maya, head to her Instagram, which is teach.kids.money. Also, be sure to check out my favorite morning starters, including Pique Teas and LMNT. Of course, you can find all the links to those in the show notes. As always, thanks for joining me today. If you're enjoying PG-ish, find me on Instagram at PG-ish Parenting, and please subscribe and leave a comment or review on Apple Podcasts so that more parents can grow alongside their kiddos like you. See you next time, my friend.